Hello and welcome to this new episode of Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers podcast. So today we're talking about the wound of not deserving, which is something that does come from having experienced maternal narcissism growing up. So being brought up by a narcissistic mother, it's a traumatic experience. If you are here listening to this, you know that by now. But what does that truly mean? The word trauma comes from Greek and means wound. When we carry undealt trauma in the body, it's like saying we have a wound or wounds that are not being taken care of. So if you cut your finger, you feel pain. And that pain is what tells you that you need to tend to the cut. Also, you might see blood. Another sign, you need to do something about it. Those are all signs. The wounds we carry inside are a little less obvious, as in they're not so visible like the blood on a cut finger, but they are there nonetheless. So undealt with trauma is stored in the body, and pain is the sign that tells you something must be done. And this pain can be physical pain or emotional pain. Like, for example, the pain of feeling anxiety, sadness, depression, lack of sleep, lack of vitality, lack of joy, and more are all part of that. And here, I mean, when these are constant in your life, you know, it's perfectly normal to feel some sadness if something has actually happened in your life to cause that, or not to be able to sleep once for some particular reason. But when it is the trauma affecting your life, these feelings and experiences are happening all the time. So much that we end up normalizing them and believing that is just how life is meant to be. That is just the way I am. I don't sleep that much at night. That's just me. Or I don't know, the labeling, I'm an anxious person, I'm a depressed person, I'm this and I'm that. We just normalize these signs. The same can be said for forms of physical illness. There are studies now that prove that many illnesses, addictive behaviors, eating disorders are connected to childhood trauma. That's where they originate. Also, the wound caused by maternal narcissism is a relational wound. So we need to understand that as well. What does that mean? It means it will affect how you relate with others. That is, it will affect your capacity to open and receive another, to trust, to be intimate, to accept love and give love. This impacts your romantic relationships as well as friendships, your relating with your children, your boss at work, your colleagues, so on. Our body and our emotional system give us plenty of signs that we need to tend to the wound we carry. And yet, over my 15 years working with women, and indeed in my own personal experience, of course, as well, I've observed how despite all that we go through, despite the pain we feel daily, despite life not going our way at all, despite all the suffering and unhappiness, we still hesitate when it comes to do something for ourselves. Do you feel that way? Does that ever happen to you? To know something would truly benefit you and to be there anxious and worried is not the right decision and like doubts and so on. It has happened to me plenty. Plenty. But why do we do that? What I found, and through a lot of self-exploration and in my experience working with women and through research, that there's a deep wound at the root of all of it. And I call it the wound of not deserving. This wound is carried, so it has two aspects. There's an origin that is personal to this life and an origin that is more ancestral. This wound is carried through generation in every woman's DNA since the beginning of what we call the patriarchy. That's some 5,000 years ago. So women for centuries have been deemed to be less than, faulty just by existing, just faulty just because they were women. Just because you're a woman, you're already a problem. And that's something that still goes on in today's society in many different ways. So if you would like to dive deeper into generational trauma, you can go and listen to the special episode on this podcast with the amazing Deborah Hilby, and if you haven't already. And in that episode, we speak more to that, because I'm not going to go into that in depth in that here, but it's just to understand that this wound is something we carry as women, generation after generation. It's in our memory, it's in our body's memory, is in our system. Now, when we add to that the trauma of having a narcissistic mother, the wound of not deserving is open and reinforced. So that's why I'm saying there's like an origin of that ancestral, but there is also in your own life, because you will hear some people will say that it's only the ancestral one, and some others will say it's only the one in your life right now, the rest is crap. What I found, what I've observed, what I felt is that both for me seem to be true at the same time. They work off each other. A narcissistic mother, whether through direct abuse or covert abuse or neglect, will leave you believing you're faulty, broken, responsible for her emotional and physical state as well as others, not capable. She will shame you and belittle you, which ultimately results in a deeply rooted belief that you do not deserve love, joy, satisfaction, pleasure, and so on. Her love is conditional, and the bar you need to meet to fulfill those conditions is ever moving higher, leaving you feeling again like you do not deserve her love and appreciation. And if your own mother doesn't love you, for sure you do not deserve anything good in this life. I mean, the mother that is meant to love you, that's what we expect. It's the mother role, the nourishing mother. She is meant to love you. I mean, it's the one person in this world that should love you unconditionally. This is in the ideal world, okay? So when that person doesn't love you unconditionally, the child really starts believing, okay, there's something wrong with me, because naturally, you watch a documentary of the mother, the lioness with the cub, or with, everywhere around us is telling us the mother should love her child, and this is not happening for you. That sets in this deeply rooted belief that there's something wrong with you and that you're faulty, inherently undeserving to be loved, or else she would love you, because we don't fault the parent ever as children. We bring the fault onto ourselves. So translated on a practical everyday life level, this means you believe you do not deserve time to yourself, you do not deserve to spend money on yourself, you don't deserve to be loved, to feel joy, to open up in an intimate relationship and experience pleasure. You don't deserve to be heard, to take a space, and so on. The wound of not deserving can lead you to carry two kinds of energy. And this is important to understand. So one aspect is the victim energy. And this is where you believe the world is against you and you feel fear to do anything about it. And there's a hopelessness as a result of that. Life is misery and there's nothing you can do about it kind of way. And then the other side of it is the entitlement energy. And which is like the opposite. It's like the whole world owes you something and you aggressively demand time, money, affection, and so on. You're entitled to it. You feel strongly entitled to it and you go at it. And also all the shades in between, of course. These are not two types, as in there would be people that would have more, they will react to this wound more with the victim energy, and some people that will react to this wound more with an entitlement energy. But we kind of have both, and very often, depending on the situation that we're in, one or the other will come up, or with the people that we're interacting with. I have personally experienced both extremes in different aspects of my life. In some situations, I was more playing the victim and using that energy, and in some situations, I was more aggressive and feeling more entitled and going at it that way. It took me a long time and a lot of pain to realize that at the root of both those aspects was the same deep wound, a belief buried deep down that I did not deserve joy, love, and anything good in my life, and that I was born inherently faulty and undeserving of that. But it also caused a lot of pain to everyone around me. So it was quite the journey to understand where that came from and to shift it. Another aspect of this wound, which is part of this way we show up when we have been wounded that way, is the tendency of taking everything personal and to become self-absorbed in your own emotional reactivity, which again deeply impacts your life and every relationship you have. So how does that work? Something happens, you react emotionally, you have emotional reaction that is triggered in you, and you get stuck in that state, either feeling like the victim or totally entitled to feeling like that, and act from there. And that is very difficult to navigate it for the people around you as well, or for yourself, because that's like a painful. Usually we get stuck in very painful places. I'm trying to find an example here. Like, yeah, I suppose like if my partner, there were things where sometimes he could say something and my interpretation of it was such that I would go in a state of, I absolutely hate you. I'm 100% closed. I don't want to have any relationship with you right now. I wouldn't speak those words, but that's the state that was happening in me. What I felt was completely entitled to be like that because I was 100% right in my perspective. And I would be in that state, like I could be in that state for days, which is completely unreachable. Like he couldn't talk to me, he couldn't be near me, there was no dialogue. It's like complete disconnection. We could continue to do the practical things, of course, like running a family and stuff, but I was 100% closed. It took us a lot to unpack this, because obviously at the beginning he didn't understand that was like an emotional reactivity that was coming from a trauma that I was carrying. I didn't know that. So then he had his own story of his own trauma that came into that and brought in his own wounds and his own reactivity. And you can well imagine how that can escalate really quickly. And like it brought us really close to breaking up several times until we understood how this works, where I was coming from, where he was coming from, which wounds, which were the filters that we were using to interpret the situation, and so on and so forth. So that's just to explain how this can work on a practical level and really compromise the relationships you have. The entitlement energy, I want to speak to that for a moment, because the victim energy is easier to understand. I think. I don't know. You can ask me questions. You can send me emails on this and ask questions if I'm assuming. But we've observed it probably. Like, I don't know. I've seen it in my family. So much victim energy. Like, everything that's happening is nothing to do. Ultimately, it comes from a wound that you feel faulty and wrong, but you kind of put it in a way that it's like the rest of the world is at fault for how I'm feeling. It's a protective strategy. If you can make the rest of the world at fault and you're the poor little victim, someone's gonna take care of you. So they're both are protective strategy. But the entitlement energy, it's a weird one, because sometimes it seems like it can be interpreted very often, like there's some mentors I've heard speaking to that promote entitlement energy, really, ultimately. And they will tell you that you have to go at it, and then you deserve this, you deserve that, and you demand it, and if you don't get it, and I get the message, I really do get the message. That can be interpreted, though, in a way that is not very helpful, and it can fuel the entitlement energy, which is, again, nothing other than a protective strategy to prevent us from feeling the deep hurt of not deserving. But in order to keep us from feeling this pain, we end up causing more pain to ourselves and to others around us. That really impacted my life very much. It was hard to realize how much pain I ended up causing to my current family because of that. Do I judge myself for that? Well, I used to quite a bit. when I realized, but not anymore, because ultimately I was not aware back then of what was going on inside of me. I didn't know any of this. What I'm sharing with you right now, I didn't know any of this. So once I became aware of all of these, things changed. So I'm not here judging any of you with any of the behaviors, any of the feelings, any of the triggers, anything that happens and goes on in your life right now, because when you're not aware, you don't know what's happening. And even when you become aware on a rational level, there's the whole trauma responses within the body that still go on despite all your thinking and all your rationalizations of it. So no judgment here, and as always, the invitation is really not to judge yourself. Be very kind with yourself, and do all you can to shift it. Do all you can to understand it and move it within your body and move through it and heal. Yes, absolutely, but don't judge yourself for it. There's one very clear way this wound of not deserving manifested for me. It was the bone deep anxiety that would take me over at the idea of doing something for myself. So I want to get practical here and speak a little bit about that. For example, I could spend money for my daughters, no problem. Like, even at times when we had no money to spend, I could still spend money on them easily. But when it came to do it for me, even, like, that's funny to say that, but it's true. Even buying a pair of socks would be a challenge. I've had socks for years, mending every little hole in them just not to buy a new pair. And that is because I had to justify everything. So if I bought a new pair of socks, it had to be because I really needed them for work. Which provides for others, provides for my family. So there is a justification there. Or I could say that my old socks had holes in them that were like so bloody big at that point that they couldn't be fixed anymore. I mean, they were disintegrating, literally. So I had to buy new socks. And still, even though I had gotten rationally to a point of justifying that no one could argue with me why I bought them, still the anxiety would be there and could only be sedated by some form of approval. and this approval could come from anybody I elected subconsciously for the role at that time. So that could be my husband, my father, a friend, an expert. Well, I don't know, is there such thing as a socks expert? But jokes aside, even my mother, obviously my mother, I mean, for a big portion, until I realized the dynamics, my mother was my go-to person for approval. So, like, as painful as it was, always an experience, but I was seeking her approval, and if I had her seal of approval on something I did, then I was sorted. And growing up needing to meet unreachable condition in order to receive her approval and love, which I rarely ever got, created this dynamic. The anxiety, the need for approval and validation, a kick that is very short-lived, because ultimately we believe we're undeserving. So yeah, you get that little kick when you get that expert that confirms that, yeah, you need that or you need this or whatever, and you're completely justified in your spending money on yourself because you got that approval, that seal of validation. And then once that moment, that kick is gone, you go back into feeling, oh my God, is this the right decision? What have I done? And the panic sets in and the anxiety sets in. So when it comes down to invest in yourself, in your healing, in something that is good for you, this wound can come to the surface in a few different ways. And why am I talking to this? Why the wound of not deserving and investing in yourself are really deeply related. They're really connected to each other. Because when you feel like you don't deserve anything good, how are you gonna give yourself a gift? That's really, really hard. That's like there's a wall. I remember meeting a wall every time I wanted to do that for myself. Even to conceive the thought or the intention of doing something for myself for a long time, that was just not even a possibility. Never mind getting to the point of thinking of spending on myself, but the before, like the getting the idea, it wouldn't even cross my mind. So this can come to the surface in different ways. Anxiety, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of lack of money, so getting stressed about the money situation. The sudden need to give more time to others, like your kids, for example, would be one, leaving you no time for yourself. So again, like you find a really good excuse. Oh, well, I would do this for myself, but my kids are taking all my time, so I can't. Another excuse is putting in front the needs of others with apparent selflessness. And I'm calling it apparent because I'm not saying that you are selfish or that you don't actually want to help others, but you use that as an excuse in a very convenient moment not to do something for yourself, not to face that challenge and that pain. A long list of rational reasons why you shouldn't. I have heard incredibly creative reasons from my mind and from the mind of other women I've worked with. Another way is an insane notion that your life isn't so bad after all and you don't need support. That is really an interesting one. Again, I've experienced it in my own life and I have seen it very clearly with others I've worked with. All of a sudden, like, I'll speak for myself for a moment and give you a practical example. So I'm in front of someone and a mentor or someone that I'm considering working with, and like up until a moment before, I'm describing my life as I'm feeling sad, depressed, I'm feeling lonely, I have panic attacks, my family's breaking apart, I don't know how to get up in the morning and get out of bed. If my mother rings me, that's it, like I'm out for like days at the time, if not weeks. And then I'm at the moment that I have to make the decision, and all of a sudden my brain is giving me all these I don't know, suggestions or indications that my life is actually really good. Well, after all, I'm not that bad, yeah, I can do it, and I just get on with it, and I found ways, and blah blah blah. And it's like, what? I know for the person in front, this must be really interesting, because you're going from like one description of your life, which is really unbearable to live, to one that is not so bad. And that is not because you've suddenly realized how appreciative you can be of your life. It is because you're making excuses, and your brain is trying to protect you from feeling the pain and not deserving. So you just turn it around, saying that you don't need it. I don't know, has that ever happened to you? But I have definitely done that a good few times in my life. Another thing is sudden important priorities that can't be rescheduled, which seems like a really this is beyond my control. All of a sudden, some member of the family needs my assistance. All of a sudden at work, they decided to change all the shifts, and I have to work double, and I just couldn't avoid it. And here I am, so I can't actually do what's good for me. And also another one is unforeseen obstacles that spontaneously come in the way. Again, same thing, very similar to sudden important priorities, slightly different, but more or less the same. The car broke down all of a sudden, all my money has to go in there. I can't afford to do anything good for myself. And just be honest with yourself for a moment, let's go through this list one more time and feel, what comes up for you when you're about to do something that is really good for you, okay? That is really something in your heart you're drawn to, because because your life is at the point where you really need to do something about it. That part of you that knows that you deserve something better in your life is there, okay? Buried, but is there, and every now and again kicks up a fuss and starts telling you, woman, this is no way to live. There's more out there. You can be happy, you can feel joy, you can feel pleasure, you can feel all of those things. You just need to do something about it, and now is the time. That comes up, that moment of inspiration comes up, and then a wave of anxiety, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of lack of money, sudden need to give more time to your kids or anyone else, putting in front the needs of others with apparent selflessness, a long list of rational reasons why you shouldn't do what you want to do, an insane notion that your life isn't so bad after all and you don't need support, sudden important priorities that can't be rescheduled, unforeseen obstacles that spontaneously come in the way. Does that ever happen to you? Take a moment and feel into that. Again, not to judge yourself. This is not like, oh, I'm so bad, this happens to me all the time. It's not like that. It's just when we realize that this happens, that's the first gift. It's like, whoa, yeah, I do that. That happens to me all the time. Wow. Okay, now I know it. So next time that comes up, I know it's just a protective strategy. That's all it is. Feeling undeserving is such a deep pain. Of course we want to protect from it. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. And I want to tell you something that might make you smile, but I used to get so frustrated with others when I saw these behaviors. When I could observe this happening in others, it used to just... I used to come home and go with my husband, oh, you wouldn't believe that happened again. I was chatting with this friend, and then, why? Why was I getting so frustrated? Now, this was years ago when I was a lot younger and a lot more impulsive. But that happened. I used to get so frustrated because I was doing it all myself all the time. I was a master at finding reasons not to invest in myself. And When that is what you do, it's easier to get frustrated when you observe it in others and you're very blind at what you're doing yourself. So once I realized the pattern and this is what I was doing, a lot of compassion actually came up for others. When I see that that happens, it's literally just pure like love, compassion, understanding. I really get it. I get it. I so get it. I've done it so much. I really get what you're trying to do there. Subconsciously, without awareness, but I do get what you're trying to do. You're just trying to protect. And that is so wise. That makes so much sense. When you were a child, you had to protect that way. It just, of course, it's just not needed anymore. And it's not needed always. There are times you still need to protect, of course, but with awareness, not just by automatic protective strategies that just come into place. But in a lot of situations, you don't actually need that, and it's time to let go of that. It's also important if you're listening to this and you're going, oh, but I do invest in myself all the time. I mean, I went to that foot massage the other week, and I consistently pay for my facials, and I went to the doctor, or I did this and I did that, or I went on a sabbatical for like a couple of weeks, and just it's all brilliant and great. That's great. Well done for doing those things. Anything that is about caring for yourself, giving time and space for yourself and resetting, it's amazing. But I can see that, like, I could do that on minor things too. Okay, those are minor things. If there are things that don't feel challenging to sign up for or to do, then there are minor things that you can do from a mind-led place and not fully. They don't actually have a massive impact. They have a little impact, and that's good. I'm not saying not do those things, but that's not the juice of this. I could do it on minor things, and I felt like I got there. I was like a champion of self-care. And I started, but when I started, when I started becoming aware of the mechanism, especially, the first little bits of awareness, I could go buy socks without justifying anymore. Well done, you. Joking aside, I could do courses and things like that because I could justify them. You start, like, go back to, are you still justifying? That's like the key as well. Because, if I did a course, for example, which was ultimately it was about my healing, but also I could justify it. I'm gonna make money out of this, like I remember with my family, especially with my mother, with my grandmother, with my dad, I could say like, yeah, it seems like I'm investing a lot of money in myself, but ultimately this is gonna, it's gonna go on my website that I can do these things, and it's gonna make me more money. And so ultimately it's not actually for myself that I'm doing this, but it's to improve in my work. So can you see, like, those were things that skimmed the surface, and also I could find justifications. But when it came to the real stuff, something that was purely just for me, only for my own healing, there was no way. The barrier came back up, the wall came back up, and it was really hard to go through it. It took me a year from the first time I contacted the mentor I knew was for me. I knew, like, I was 100% like, yes, this stuff resonates with me so much. This is what I need right now. I'm not doing this to learn a skill. I'm not doing this because I want to make money out of it. I'm wanting to do this for me. So it took me a year from the point I first contacted this incredible woman to the point I officially signed up. A year. And in the meantime, my life had broken to such level that no argument could be made anymore. And that's one really important thing I want to share with you, because there's a point when life comes in and forces you to choose yourself over everything else, to prioritize yourself. Not everyone does it even then, but life comes in strong. Something comes that forces you to slow down and face your fears, your doubts, your anxieties, whatever. And this can be whatever it takes to shake you. Okay, the intensity of it is whatever it takes to shake you and create the shift that's necessary. From, like, I'm not trying to be dramatic about this, but like illnesses, accidents, anything like that, a big sudden change, a divorce, whatever it is. For me, it was the breaking apart of my family, like my partner and I being at the point of total breakup, not knowing what to do with my children, having zero money, zero, like not even savings. Like when I said zero money, I mean zero money. It was really rough. It was really rough. And books have been written about things like this. If you, for example, When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate, that's an example. And there's plenty of other studies like that and books like that. And what have you noticed? When there is something physical and obvious that you need to sort, it's like the cut. It's like the cut on the finger. I mean, if your finger is bleeding, you don't need to go through, oh, I deserve a plaster, or don't I deserve a plaster? Am I faulty? Am I broken? No, your finger is bleeding. You go to the cupboard and you take out the plaster and you stop the bleeding. Because that's a situation that doesn't need justification. That is like, that's it, in most cases. But so when you have something physical, like an illness, you feel justified to go into the doctor or the specialist, or would do whatever it takes. You don't go to your partner or to your family and ask for approval. Like, I'm really physically ill. Can I just get some help here? Like, most of the times that's easy. We used to do that all the time here. It was like, I have back pain, so I need to rest. Wouldn't rest any other moment, but like when my back pain was just such that I couldn't move, I had to rest. So can you see what the mechanism happens? Something happens that becomes so obvious that you can't not do something about it. For years, I never felt I could take a break. I didn't deserve it. Like, I work. I never stop. And when I'm not working in terms of making money working, I'm working in terms of keeping the house clean and making the family happy. I'm always on the go, always on the go. Breaks were forced on me by getting so sick I couldn't get out of bed. No one could argue when I rested then. I couldn't argue with myself, because ultimately that's the thing. I couldn't argue with myself anymore because, I couldn't bloody move out of the bed. So there's no arguments there. You gotta rest, right? So what I want to say is that it doesn't have to get to that. It really doesn't. If you're here listening to this, it's hardly because you so like the sound of my voice. If you do, thank you, but I don't think that's the reason you're here. It's likely because what you experience in your childhood, with your mother in particular, still impacts your life today. Hard enough that you're seeking resolution. And I get that. Yes, I really get that. So let me be direct with you, because that's what we do here. And from a place of love from me to you. If you're waiting for the fear and anxiety to go away before investing in yourself, you'll be waiting for a long time. If you're waiting for everything in your life to line up just perfectly so that you can finally have the time to fully dedicate to your healing, you'll be waiting for a long time. If you're waiting to have that spare money, that sits there doing nothing so that you can guilt-free invest in yourself, you'll be waiting for a long time. The uncomfortable truth that I had to face personally just over 3 years ago, when I felt broken, scared, and so undeserving of anything good, was that there's no way to bypass that fear that comes up. The only way is through. That's like a mantra. The only way is through. You are the creator of your life. No one else is. And if you're experiencing sadness, lack of vitality, depression, pain, you name it, if you feel faulty, guilty, undeserving, what you create from there is not going to be the life you want. You know, it's either start the healing now or 15 years ago kind of situation. That's how I felt about myself. I had to learn that the hard way, and it was bloody painful. It was really painful, and it was really hard. So that's where I'm coming from. That's why I want to be direct. It's really from love. It's like I don't want you to go through the same sort of shit. And if you are already going through that same sort of shit, it's time to do something about it. You know, this is not a sales pitch for my offerings. Yes, of course, you can choose to work with me. I do have offerings that are aimed to support you in situations like this, because that's what I've been through and that's what I'm good at. But you can do that somewhere else too, with some other mentor, coach, guide, whoever that resonates with you. That's totally fine. This is not about where you choose to seek support. If it's women reclaiming their fullness or somewhere else that feels right to you, I don't actually care. What I do care for a lot is that you get how important you are, how incredibly lovable you are, how deserving of your time and attention and care you are, and how precious your life and happiness is. That's what I do care for. So stop waiting for the confidence to come. It's courage you need right now. The definition of courage is to act in the face of the fear you feel. There's a full episode on this podcast if you want to go deeper, if you haven't listened to this already. And the title is How a Narcissistic Mother Destroys Your Confidence, I think. Yeah. And I go really deep into the whole courage versus confidence in that episode, and it's important. So you can go listen to that if you haven't already. But the bottom line here is that there isn't a good or bad time. There's only now. There aren't good or bad choices. There only is what you choose. So feel into it. Look at your life right now, your inner and outer experience of it. Is it what makes you happy and joyful and alive? Question mark. Is it? If it is, brilliant, and I really want to celebrate that. But if it isn't, if it's anything other than what you want, anything other than what makes you happy, your time to change that is now. Not when it gets catastrophically messy, but now. You deserve it. You really deserve it. That's the thing. You deserve it. Anyone who tells you otherwise is because they too feel undeserving and they don't know it. And that's okay. It's the life experience. But forget about what they say, because that's just not the point. You deserve to give yourself the chance to feel joy and happiness and pleasure and aliveness and more. And this is a journey, and you can start it right now. And that's what I care for. That's why I'm here. That's what really is like my intention every time that I sit down in front of the microphone, every time that I sit down in front of someone for a session, every time that I've run the circles. That's what is my intention, is to support women in understanding that, yes, we are beings that, like, women are like wired for nourishing. Yeah, like we are wired to create lovingly and to nourish lovingly. But when we're so wounded, like we are, that's just a fact. Especially if you're here listening to this, you've had a mother that was narcissistic, then there's wounds there. That nourishing and loving energy is not expressed towards ourselves ever. It's always out. It goes out to everybody else. I've seen like amazing women, and what they don't do for their children and what they don't do for their partners, and it's like what they don't do for their community. It's incredible, amazing, admirable, beautiful. But like for themselves, nothing, nothing, nothing. And you can't, the thing is, you can't love others if you don't love yourself. And that is really, really true. The only, like, you can only love others to the extent that you're able to love yourself. Again, that was something that I always fought against. I was like, that's bullshit. I can love others even if I feel like crap inside. Not really. The energetic is the same. You're doing things for others to get a kick, but it doesn't actually come from a real undiluted love. And that's a really hard pill. That was a hard pill to swallow for me. But I had to. My life changed massively when I did, so that's why I'm sharing this with you. Even with my children, I thought I was doing everything for them, but the energy was coming from was still an energy of inadequacy, of not enough, and not deserving, and I was passing that energy to them. So although I did everything for them, they still felt like they didn't deserve shit, and that's terrible. When I realized that, it was like, whoa, 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 this has to stop. I can't pass this to my own girls. I can't keep this energy going. I need to learn that I deserve to take care of myself, to invest in myself, not from an entitled point, not from an like, I bloody do this because that's just, I deserve it. Like, that's an energy again that comes, is a defensive energy, and it still comes from not deserving. But a real grounded, I just deserve this, yes. This feels really right for me right now. Comes from this place of groundedness in me, from my heart, from my belly. My entire gut feeling is yes. My body is coming alive, yes. So I'm gonna do it. And learn the difference of when it comes from that place and when it comes from victim, from entitlement energy, from the wounds, when the wounds are speaking instead of your heart. And yeah, that's it. This was a long episode. This was well, I don't know in time because I haven't checked the time, but long in terms of intense and vulnerable to share. And I know it's gonna bring up reflections and emotions within you. So again, feel free to contact me. You can leave comments on the actual episode. Like, I know on some platforms, like, you can do that. Or you can send me an email. Share your reflections. If you have questions, you can do that. So I also want to share with you a little practicality now. Both the women's circles and the 10 weeks one-on-one programs are accessible as in on a waiting list. So if you're contacting me for the women's circle at this moment, or if you're contacting me for the program, the doors are closed, but you can contact me anyways, and that's gonna give you access to a waiting list, so that when the door opens again, which is gonna be at the beginning of 2024, you are gonna be on the waiting list already, and you'll have priority, because the spaces I open up, especially for the 10 weeks program, the spaces I open up are very few. There's usually 4 each wave. So it's really important if you want to be on the waiting list for, it's possibly going to be end of January, start of February 2024, that the new wave will be open. So yeah, you can contact me anyways, and you will get access to the waiting list. With that said, I'm going to send you lots of love and wish you have a wonderful week until next Tuesday. Bye for now.